So, linear algebra, basic concepts, and some matrix algebra. In particular, the way we'll see it in the data sciences. So, rectangular arrays of numbers are often interpreted as m observations of n features, rows of observations, columns of features. This is an m by n rectangular array. And the set of all possible m by n arrays is denoted, this double-stretched r with a superscript m times n. For example, suppose we have samples or observations or instances of variables, which are also known as features or factors, x1 to xn. Well, if we have m observations of those n variables, we get an m by n rectangular array. For example, suppose we have exam grades for a class of 30 students over a semester. Then the scores on the exams, respectively, would be our variables. That is, a feature is a variable which is sampled to produce data. And that data is the ith column, which is the set of observations or samples of the variable xi. And a column is itself a rectangular array in R m cross 1. M rows by one column rectangular array. Typically, we omit the times 1, and column arrays are always written with a bold font. A matrix is a list of columns, A1 to AN, where each of these is in RM. So notationally, this double script R m cross n is n times n arrays. The set of all such arrays forms a vector space. And arrays in data science are seldom square. So you won't see us very often saying that we explicitly have a square matrix. It does occur, but most of the time think of them as rectangles. So a RM is column arrays with m real coefficients. RM is a method for writing RM times 1. A row is the transpose of a column, and vice versa. The transpose of a column is a row. So for example, we could look at this word counts of words in the plays of Shakespeare. These columns are actually vectors in RM. And notice that samples of features are columns in RM. This is just repeating what we said. And so if we have the plays of Shakespeare and words and word counts, then all of those columns forms a list of columns, which is a matrix. Matrix arithmetic, well, remember RM cross n is a vector space, so we have that arithmetic already, linear combinations. And if we have two columns in RM, then we denote those with a bold font. And we can find the inner product to be A transpose B is equal to the row A transpose times the column B, which is this sum of products. Here it is in sigma notation. The matrix product, well, we take the first and we think of it as a set of rows. We take the second matrix, we think of it as a collection of columns, and then the product is the rows of the first inner product with the columns of the second, respectively. The outer product, on the other hand, is AB transpose. That's a column times a row, and it forms a matrix that is m by n, as you can see here, of individual products. The identity matrix is a diagonal matrix. Notice I didn't write all the zeros in. If I had, for example, I would have ended up with, say, I4, which is the four-dimensional identity matrix. So what do I expect you to know? Well, we'll review and introduce concepts in linear algebra as needed, but I do assume you know at the following point: the dot product and matrix multiplication. So these last two slides should have been review. The real inner product properties. The norm of u squared is u dot v is equal norm u norm v cosine theta. and sigma notation, which we also have already seen. So at times we'll have several rectangular data sets that form a box of rectangles that we'll often call a tensor. For example, a collection of spreadsheets. And this is going to be something that often makes data sets quite large. 100 spreadsheets with 100 observations of 100 factors, that's 1,000,000 data points. But you'll see this, for example, if you had, say, databases spread across several locations and you had several different tables from different locations, then you might end up with a box of rectangles. You also will see a box of rectangles when you look at a color image, because a color image is actually a box of red, green, and blue pixel arrays. This is a tensor, a box of red, green, and blue pixel arrays. Video can be thought of as a box of color images. So all tensors with the same dimensions, they also form a vector space. So this color image is actually an RM cross N cross 3. The picture is M tall by N wide and 3 different color channels. And this forms a vector space, which we often call a tensor space. So tensors is linear algebra with multi-dimensional arrays, linear combinations, dot products, bases, span. But we do not need tensor algebra, nor do we need to generalize matrix techniques to tensors. We'll use vector spaces of tensors quite often, these tensor spaces. But a tensor is a vector in a tensor space, and we can just apply linear algebra to the tensor as a vector in a tensor space without worrying about generalizing the matrix algebra concepts in total to tensors. In other words, our focus in this course is on columns, rows, rectangles, and boxes of rectangles. And we'll be using matrix algebra applied to rectangles, and everything else, all the other structures besides rectangles, will be just things that are used to define vector spaces.